Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of The Cosmic Force. I'm one of your hosts, Emma Park, and tonight we are doing things a little differently than normal. And by tonight, I actually mean today, because we're actually pre-recording this in the afternoon with Christmas and all. So instead of missing a show for the holidays, I thought it'd be fun to pre-record an episode that's a bit unique to what we've done in the past. So today, we're talking about the Legends miniseries called Jedi: The Dark Side with a special guest. You probably know her as a host on our sister show, Legends Look Back. It's Utini's COO, Emily Daybeck. Emily, how are you?
Doing well. It is raining in the Mojave Desert, which is something I can say has happened less than 5 times since I moved here 6 months ago. So it's very exciting. We're all thrilled, and my daughter is afraid of the rain because she's seen it so seldom in her life.
Oh my goodness,
She was like
crazy.
running through it, like just crying the whole time.
Like, oh
hey,
no,
it's just water. You're okay.
I imagine it's kind of like when you get a pet and they've never seen like snow before and they're like kind of excited but also a little nervous. I imagine it's kind of like that.
Yes, it was really funny. She just stood in the garage, like holding her shoes, crying, like, what are we supposed to do? But I was carrying things I couldn't like carry her through to the house. So she just had to make a break for it.
Yeah,
it was pretty sad.
Had to figure it out. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That must be quite the sight. It'd be like raining on Tatooine. It'd be super weird.
Yes, it is very, very like that. It's a very dusty place here.
I bet. Well, it's super exciting to have you on the show. I think that this is like one of the first live shows between all three of our live shows that's ever had only 2 hosts, which is pretty crazy. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes.
And we're the token women.
That's right. Right.
It's just us. So
that's right.
This will be fun.
Absolutely. So, just a heads up for everybody watching on YouTube, I am producing this week. I also have a Mac, and Mac they don't like to stream. So if things look not up to par, apologies for that. The audio should still be good to go, but the video is a little choppy, so apologies for that. But we're making it work. All right. So if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. It's not usually like this, but it'll be fun. We are a Star Wars comics podcast that usually broadcasts live right here on youtube.com/Utini every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you can't join us live, that's okay because we're also available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. We're also part of the Utini podcast network of nearly a dozen shows, including Emily's Legends Look Back, and a Discord channel with over 1,000 members and dozens of channels that can be found at utini.com/Discord. I always want to say YouTube. Utini, YouTube. If you like what you see and want to say thanks, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Utini, where for as little as $5 a month, you can gain exclusive access to the entire Utini podcast network of shows, as well as exclusive merch and community involvement activities. So even though this show is a bit different from our normal show, we've still got the weekly pull list for December 22nd, which is when this is going to premiere on YouTube. So let's dive right into that. And I'm going to stall for time for a second because I've got all kinds of things going on. All right, here we go. Weekly pull list. So this week we have quite a few things, actually. So first up, we've got The High Republic Trail of Shadows #3 by Daniel Jose Older with pencils by David Watcher. The cover is by David Lopez, and the colors are by Giada Marchisio. I can't wait for that one. This series has been really good. All right, next up here, we have Darth Vader #19 by Greg Pak with pencils by Yui Villanova, cover by Ryan Stegman, and colors by Alex Sinclair. So those are the single issues coming out this week. We also have 2 trades coming out. The first we have also from Darth Vader 2020. It's the 3rd volume with the subtitle War of the Bounty Hunters by Greg Pak with pencils by Raphael Yanko and Yui Villanova. Cover is by Aaron Cooter and Richard Isanove. The colors are by Dean White, Jason Keith, and Rochelle Rosenberg, with letters by Joe Caramanga. And last up, we have Star Wars Adventures 2020, Volume 1, called The Light and the Dark, with various authors and various artists. The great thing about Star Wars Adventures is that you get so much variety in who's writing the stories and who is drawing them as well. So absolutely check that out. I haven't actually checked the Star Wars Adventures out yet from 2020 anyways, so really looking forward to that trade. All right, Emily. Usually here we do either an art of the week or what we're loving, but I know that you're relatively new to the comics, so I was wondering if you could maybe, in lieu of that, tell us about your Star Wars journey, especially with the expanded universe, and also if you have any experience with comics.
That's an excellent question. My experience with Star Wars is very different actually than most of the staff here at UTini. I did not grow up reading Star Wars or even understanding why people liked it. It wasn't until I actually met Corey, our CEO, in person that I even knew that there were Star Wars books. And the books actually got me interested in the movies, which got me interested in, legends and comics and all that. So I think I first started reading Star Wars books right before my daughter was born in 2018. So I've only been a fan for a couple years now. But in that time, I've binged. So we covered quite a bit of content. I finally joined the team in 2020, I think, or December 2019. And then I started on Legends Look Back just a few months ago. So I'm very new to Legends. I'm pretty familiar with most of canon, but Legends material was just so crazy. I had no idea where to start.
Yeah.
And the biggest kicker for me, because I get most of my content online from the library, they didn't have a lot of online resources for the older books. So that's why I haven't read a ton of Legends, but I'm getting started. And in fact, we just this past Thursday recorded a comic. Oh my goodness, what did we read? But Boba Fett Bloodlines, the omnibus. We read that, and that was my first comic. So
amazing.
It was very interesting, very different from what I am used to, because usually books, there's a lot of lead up, plenty of time to develop characters, and you really don't get that in comics at all. You just jump straight in.
Oh yeah.
And there's illustration. So it's somewhere between a book and a show, which is really fun. And they're really fast to read, which is exciting. You can really binge through a lot of content in not a lot of time, which I love.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is my second series.
That's amazing. I mean, crazy how the timing worked out, by the way.
I know. It's great.
I'm gonna throw a bunch of comics at you. Here you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. I think I read one of the miniseries in that omnibus before. I think I was on an episode of Legends Look Back about Legends comics, and I remember loving it so much, and it was awesome.
It was really good. Boba Fett is a man of very few words, so it's he plays really well in comics.
Oh, 100%.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, him and Darth Vader are perfect comic characters.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, and on another note, I have to say that I really appreciate your perspective on Legends Look Back, because I'm also very new to Legends, and I'm definitely sort of following very closely with the canon side, but have been trying to dabble a little bit in Legends. So I like the newbie perspective as well, along with Jared and Freddie's expert perspective, and Rick's as well. I mean, he's kind of somewhere in between you guys, I feel like. So that's been really fun to watch.
Yes, it is always a humbling experience to go on the show knowing as little as I do. So if you are also new to Legends, you are not alone. Just tune into the show and I'll ask all the dumb questions. And so you don't have to. That's my role. But I've really enjoyed it. Freddie and Jared are just experts on all things Legends, and Rick has been collecting for a long time but hasn't read quite as much. So it's a great team to be a part of. Love being a part of that team.
Love it. Yeah. And I always say that there's no dumb questions, because if you think it's a dumb question, somebody is always asking it in their head. So there's no such thing as a dumb question.
Wikipedia.
That's right. That's right. Thank goodness for that thing, right?
Yes.
All right. So before we dive into talking about Jedi: The Dark Side, it is December 22nd. So if you haven't bought your holiday gifts yet, you probably out of luck, but in case you still need some, we've got an ad just for you, utini.gifts. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it is Eric, president of Utini and co-host of The Living Force, which you may be watching right now, here to tell you about something that's going to make the holidays a bit easier. We have made a new website for you called utini.gifts. Now, this is a website that is based around the fact that shopping for Star Wars fans is very hard. We like a lot of things, we also don't like a lot of things. So we at Utini have made some curated gift guides for you to make shopping for those in your life a little easier, and to make shopping for you a bit easier for people in your life. So whether you want Star Wars apparel, you want collectibles, you want stuff for gamers, you want stuff that's only featuring the child, you want stuff for your office, kitchen, what have you, we got guides for you curated through sites like Etsy, through sites like Amazon, through anything you can imagine. We have scoured the internet for really fun stuff. Head over to utini.gifts, that's gifts plural, like things you're going to find under the tree. Get shopping today, get anything you want for the Star Wars fan in your life, and let us know what you think.
And we are back. So yeah, like I said, it might be a little late to get your holiday gifts, but I hope that you get all the Star Wars stuff you want for the holidays, and maybe share some of that Star Wars love with the people that you love this holiday season. All right, let's dive right into talking about Jedi: The Dark Side. So a little bit of background information on this. It was written by Scott Ali, with art by Mahmoud Asrar, with colors by Paul Mount, letters by Michael Heisler, cover by Stephanie Rue. It started in on May 18th, 2011, and it ended September 21st, 2011. Chronologically, in terms of timeline, it takes place 50 years before the Battle of Yavin. So we're talking about pre-Phantom Menace time. It's going to be included in the Rise of the Sith omnibus, which is going to be out on February 8th. And I don't know this for sure, but maybe it's being covered on Legends Look Back. I know that you probably know as much as I do about that, Emily, but...
We have been meaning to go over the schedule for the upcoming spring. Jared probably has that information. We have started to talk about it with the rest of the team, but unfortunately, two of our hosts are moving in the holidays, like during this season. So it's not super high up on the list, but I will let you know. We will let you know. We always announce on Twitter what we're covering, and it should be on the Utini website as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And audience, if you like what you hear from, or if you've read along with us and you like this, you can always tweet Legends Look Back and say that you really want them to talk about this omnibus. We want to hear what you guys want to listen to, because that's important. All right, so Emily, we usually kick these off with a summary of what has happened, and I think in this series it's pretty important. There's some pretty crazy events that are happening, so I'm going to have you take the first two issues here, and sure. Let us know what happened in the beginning.
Sure. So in issue number 1, we open on Coruscant with Qui-Gon sparring with his Padawan Xanatos and Qui-Gon's former Padawan Femor. Xanatos is a bit of a jerk when he knocks Femor down and then gets a good lesson in being humble from his master. We learn that Xanatos was born of royalty, which will be important later. Qui-Gon, Xanatos, Master Tal, who's a librarian, and Oricon, a Padawan who recently lost her master, are given a mission to Telos 4, which happens to be Xanatos' homeworld. The planet is in upheaval after their high priestess, Leora, died. The group's goal is to bring peace to the world. Xanatos throws a tantrum before they leave, thinking that he's going to be replaced by Oricon as Qui-Gon's Padawan. The issue ends with a crash landing on Telos 4 after they are attacked by an unknown group, and they are greeted by Cryon, Xanatos' father. So now we move on to issue number 2, where Xanatos begins really upset and storms away. It's revealed that Xanatos has a sister named Nason, who's been meeting with a suspicious man named Dairaki. Their goal is to give Nason control of the Telos 4 government with this uprising. Meanwhile, Xanatos and Cryon have a conversation about being a Jedi and about Xanatos' heritage. Cryon thinks that Toprawa was the one that killed High Priestess Leora. Xanatos storms away in a flurry of emotions. The Jedi go to the High Priestess's death site. Oricon feels Leora's murder through the Force and collapses. Tal is elsewhere gathering something for her library when she overhears an Antarian ranger talking with a small group about the attack on the Jedi ship. She takes care of them with ease. The issue ends with Qui-Gon and Tal discussing the murder, which leads Qui-Gon to the realization that the killer is a Jedi and yet not a Jedi. Simultaneously, Oricon introduces Xanatos to his sister, Nason.
Awesome. All right. You absolutely killed those names. Those are some tough ones.
I hope that they are correct. There were some strange spellings in this series for sure.
For sure. All right. So issue number 3, we start with Qui-Gon and Cryon on a shuttle together, and they're discussing the Antarian Rangers, who are supposedly allies of the Jedi, but who Cryon describes as mercenaries. Meanwhile, Nason and Dairoki are discussing the previous events with Master Tal, coming close to killing Dairoki's men. Qui-Gon and Xanatos meet back up, and Xanatos is throwing yet another tantrum about the situation and wanting to become a Jedi Knight. Qui-Gon reveals that he thinks the answer to the killer being a Jedi and yet not a Jedi is the Antarian Rangers. Dairoki meets with one of his men who encountered Master Tal and gives him what appears to be a lightsaber, while Xanatos and Nason race speeders. Qui-Gon poses as a weapons dealer with the goal of gaining a meeting with a man named Welaquise, who is a leader of an insurgent group going against Lord Cryon. Suddenly, a sneak attack starts against Lord Cryon and the Jedi and their group. They kill Nason, causing chaos between Xanatos, Cryon, and Dairoki's reactions. All right, the issue ends with Master Tal informing the group that she's leaving Telos 4. Qui-Gon recognized Dairoki, who escaped the battle. All right, issue number 4. We start out with a huge revelation. Dairoki trained as a Jedi on Coruscant, but he never finished the training, making him a Jedi but not a Jedi. Cryon's minister brings the Jedi Masters a lightsaber that was found on one of the insurgents. Welaquise and the other insurgents start to plan their war on Telos 4. Qui-Gon returns disguised as the arms dealer, killing the insurgents and forcing Welaquise to tell him if the Antarian Rangers are involved. Welaquise informs Qui-Gon that the entire group of Antarian Rangers are involved, but before he can say any more, he is viciously shot in the head. Later, Dairoki sneaks into Lord Cryon's bedroom and wakes him. It becomes very clear that they're conspiring together, and Cryon is feeding Dairoki inside information. The issue ends with Cryon's minister delivering a speech to the people of Telos 4, saying they're stopping diplomacy with Toprawa, which is where the Antarian Rangers are based. Qui-Gon and Xanatos have it out again, and Xanatos moves to the palace. Cryon incites war between the citizens and the insurgents. All right, last issue, issue number 5.
Yes. Cryon is talking to Xanatos in a bit of a coercive manner, trying to gain his undying loyalty. Xanatos points out to Cryon that Nason wouldn't be dead if Cryon hadn't allowed the insurgency to get worse. Qui-Gon is informed by Cryon's minister of what Cryon has been conspiring to do. The minister opens up communication to the people of Telos 4 to tell them the truth and to call for a halt to the violence. Qui-Gon confronts Cryon to get Xanatos back. Qui-Gon kills Cryon, and Xanatos fights against Qui-Gon. During the battle, Qui-Gon loses Xanatos in the crowd. The issue and miniseries ends with Qui-Gon's report to the council. He tells them that Xanatos died. It's suggested that Qui-Gon isn't planning on directly returning to Coruscant.
All right, so that was like a much longer summary than what we normally do, but I'm telling you, when I was writing the summary, I had no idea how to make it any smaller because, boy, was there a lot of twists and turns in this one.
Yes, there are a lot of plot points. And like, it was a little bit disorienting to read because I was like, okay, where are we? Who, what?
Absolutely, yeah. I had to go back and look at like, okay, who is this guy again? What side was he on? And now he's on this side.
There were a lot of names. Yes. Oh my goodness.
For sure. So before we dive into our broader discussion, give me your initial rating on this miniseries and some brief overall thoughts as to why you're giving it that score.
I'll go with a 7.6. I just read, this is only the second comic I've ever read. The first one was Boba Fett, Blood Ties, and that was a lot easier to follow. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the reason why I gave Boba Fett an 8.5-ish. So a little bit less because it was a little confusing to follow, but I did appreciate the background on Qui-Gon. After reading Master and Apprentice, I kind of got a little glimpse into, I love his character. I wish that I could read more about him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I'll give it a 7.6.
All right. See, the great thing about you just starting out with comics is that you're reading them for shows where you have to rate them. So you can like compare them against each other. Like I started reading before I had to rate them. So it's just like, toss a number out there. Sounds good.
Well, it would also be nice to have a bit more of a background because I don't really know expectations for comics, like how they normally work.
True. Yeah.
And I'm not used to looking at like and ranking art or lettering. Like there's a lot of elements to comics as a piece of content that it's just hard to get a grasp on with just having only read 2 series. But
yeah, I can see that too, for sure. So I think I will give this a 6.8.
Ooh.
I know that's pretty low for me. I definitely, I thought, yeah, I mean, I'm usually in like the 8s. That's kind of like, you know, where I'm usually at. But this one, the story was so convoluted to me. I had such a hard, like when I can't follow a comic and I'm really paying attention to it, like I was while reading this one, like there's a problem somewhere. I think
that's fair.
It's kind of like, it's kind of similar to, I don't know, maybe people's thoughts on like the Phantom Menace or something. I don't know if that's a good comparison, but like politics and stuff like that are like getting too much in the way of like the story they're trying to tell. And I think that might have been the issue for me. I did like seeing more Qui-Gon, like you said. And speaking of Qui-Gon, I'm very excited to talk about him. So let's dive right in and talk about him. So he's very much the wise Jedi Master we know and love from The Phantom Menace, as well as Master and Apprentice, which we both read, which is awesome. I wasn't sure if you had read it, but that's great.
Yes.
We've got that to fall back on. He's also portrayed a bit aggressively, I would say. You know, he killed Cryon, and he initiated the combat with some of the insurgents on more than one occasion, actually. So I'm interested. I was a little conflicted in my own mind, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this first. Do you believe that this is an accurate depiction of Qui-Gon? Like, do you think he was depicted too aggressively or not aggressively enough? What do you think?
That's an excellent question. I think it was a little more aggressive than we see in the films. I think by the time he gets to Obi-Wan, he's much more pacifist. And I'm wondering if this is kind of his backstory and maybe Xanatos is the reason he changes. I'm curious because it isn't really clear if Xanatos is dead or not. It's kind of implied that he's still alive. So I'm wondering if he's going to come back in some way and cause a character change in Qui-Gon. What do you think?
So, okay, I already know the answer to that question, actually.
You do? Oh my goodness.
I do.
I meant to look it up before the show, but I ran out of time.
When I was looking up things for our Easter egg section, this is a pre-Easter egg. He does appear in, I believe they're young adult or junior readers books, a couple of them, and he runs into Qui-Gon again. So I don't know how it ends or anything, because now I'm kind of like, oh, should I read this? Like, that might be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he's a piece of work.
He is.
Sure,
I mean,
he's going to do some interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you bring up a good point, though. I think I was taken aback by how Qui-Gon was portrayed, because I definitely didn't see him like that in The Phantom Menace or even in Master and Apprentice, which I know that like one is canon, one is not, but hey, you know, it's pretty much all the same in our book, I think. And you know, so it's interesting to think that maybe, okay, like maybe he was aggressive and maybe a little angry or something during his time with Xanatos, and maybe that goes away. So yeah, I really like that idea, that line of thinking, because I was a little disappointed with how he was portrayed. But maybe there's hope. Maybe if we read, you know, those books, maybe we'll turn around and see like, okay, yeah, he turns into the Qui-Gon we know.
Yeah, I think it's something that typically happens to characters as they age. They get more temperate. They aren't quite as aggressive or hot-headed, but it is, compared to Xanatos, he's quite tame.
True.
It also could have been that, like, with them working so closely together, with Xanatos being a more angry, volatile character, that maybe that, because of their Force connection, maybe that was affecting Qui-Gon in some way as well. Not sure.
Yeah, these are all good points. So kind of moving towards the end of the miniseries in terms of Qui-Gon's character, why do you think that he told the council that Xanatos died, even though, I mean, I just told you that he technically didn't, but he like, I kind of like ruined the question, but like, he like pretty much got lost in the crowd, and I'm pretty sure that Qui-Gon would have felt in the Force if he died. So he kind of knew
That's a good
he was
point.
lying. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. What do you think about that whole situation?
I'm really not sure what to think. Because originally when I read it, I thought he actually did die and
Oh,
Qui-Gon
really?
had killed him.
Oh,
So
interesting. Because I immediately was like, oh, he's not dead. There's no way. That's interesting.
I guess I must have read it too literally, but Qui-Gon said like he ran off and Qui-Gon like called after him, and then Qui-Gon tells the council that he's dead. So in my naivete, I just assumed that Qui-Gon had actually killed him and just kind of glossed over the fact that he had killed him. But when you bring up that he's not actually dead, it makes much more sense that he just covered for him. So what are your theories?
I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks like Qui-Gon could sort of sense with Xanatos being back home that he just wasn't like cut out for the Jedi life. He definitely had a lot of anger and even more attachment now. So, and those are like not good things in a Jedi. So I'm kind of thinking like maybe he was worried that he was going to like turn to the dark side, and maybe he was just like, okay, let's just let him go and do his own thing. And yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe he thought like, oh, he'd be better serving as like ruler of what was it, Telos 4? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think he did it on purpose. And I think with Qui-Gon, like even though this is kind of a different portrayal than we've seen before, I still feel like everything with him is very calculated, and I think this is also included in that calculation.
That's a valid point. It probably was.
All right,
Yes.
so moving on to Xanatos, I'm really excited to talk about him. We could describe him as emotional and aggressive and overconfident, and he thinks that he can just do anything. Yeah, he's just very arrogant, and I did not like him.
No, he's not a likable character at
Yeah.
all. Like,
What did you think of
yeah.
him, like, in general?
He gave very angsty Vader-esque
Yeah.
vibes, which is surprising to me, seeing this happens before Vader, and Qui-Gon is like Anakin's biggest advocate. So, yeah, it's curious to me that he sees Xanatos, who's just a hot mess, and then proceeds to later in life take on a very similar Padawan. Um, anyway, but his portrayal is very immature and classist, and there's a lot of things wrong with how he treats other people and views the world. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I right from the get-go, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna like this character, am I? Like, I just knew
Mm-mm.
it. Sometimes you just get that vibe. And just with the way he was like trash talking the other Padawan when they were like sparring
Yes.
at the beginning, I was like, what the heck?
Like, not just like, oh, like you're weak or anything. It was like, no, the royal born will like take over the earth or something
Yeah, it
like
was like
that.
so
Yeah.
weird. I know.
It was real weird. Like,
I was like, what's
that's
wrong with
deep.
this kid? I was like, I'm getting like real Sith energy here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. All over the place.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, like I think that personally, I think that like him knowing that he is royalty on some
Mm.
sort of planet most definitely played into that attitude. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. I'm curious why they even chose to let him know.
Okay,
Like,
well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about this too. I mean, in canon, we definitely have seen that the Jedi are hesitant to um, sort of keep Jedi with their family or even inform them about their family. I mean, they wouldn't
mhm.
let Anakin go back and see his mother. So that we've seen in the past that they're very careful about family and how they handle those sort of connections. And so how Xanatos knew that he was a royal on another planet, and then why they would send him back to Telos for. It didn't make any sense to me.
Yes. Mistakes were made. I'm wondering how old he was when he was taken.
That's true.
And I don't know. It was just weird.
Well, and the other thing too, I mean, it is possible that they learned their lesson with Xanatos, and that's why they wouldn't let Anakin go back and see his mother. I suppose that's quite possible. Could be true. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing, it just seemed like a bunch of missteps by people making the decisions. We shouldn't have let him go back. I mean, just the thought of him going back made him almost commit suicide. I mean, he like jumped on the railing high above
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that made me so scared. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was hard to follow because there were like 2 illustrations, and all of a sudden he was fine, and then he was jumping off of a building, and then Qui-Gon was like standing on one end of a pole that kept him like suspended. It was an interesting placement.
Yeah, a very, very weird sequence of events there. So,
odd.
What do you think was the ultimate cause of the fracture between him and Qui-Gon? Because I think we could assume that they had a good relationship at some point. I mean, they do seem close in many aspects, but they almost have like a father-son sort of bickering dynamic at this point. So I think we can safely assume that they were close at one point. What do you think is the cause of that, the fracture that we see throughout this book?
I think it's abandonment. I think that plays a huge theme in his character throughout the story. So he is angry at his father for abandoning him, angry at the Jedi for sending him back to Telos 4. And then what is it? Oricon is sent along, and then there's kind of like a bait and switch sort of thing where Qui-Gon and who is the other Jedi Master? What's her name again? Tal. Yeah, so Qui-Gon and Master Tal, as they're like approaching the planet, are wondering why they sent 2 Padawans. And Tal is like very clear that it's not for her, that the Oricon was sent for Qui-Gon's benefit, which unfortunately is, of course, overheard by Xanatos. And so I just think that he's afraid he's going to be abandoned again. And I think he's got some sort of attachment to Qui-Gon. And so he's very jealous whenever Qui-Gon, whenever it's even suggested that he won't be with Qui-Gon anymore. But I feel like we've seen that in multiple Master Padawan relationships. So I'm not really sure why he took it to such extremes and other Padawans were able to handle it.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say, actually. I think it was the whole, like, Oricon thing that sort of sent... Well, that in combination with him needing or being forced to go back to his home world, I think the combination of those two just sort of, like, set off this, like, anger inside of him that had always kind of been there. And I think maybe the difference between him and other Padawans, because I'm sure that they're, like, in the history of the Jedi, there has to have been situations where, like, the Master and Padawan like didn't end up liking each other and they had to like switch or whatever. I'm sure that that's happened. And of course, not everybody always goes berserk like Xanatos did. So yeah, very very interesting character right there. I don't know. He's a mess, and but I'm also interested in him at the same time. I mean, I did say I don't like him, and it's true I don't. But at the on the other hand,
like a train wreck, you can't really look away.
Exactly. Yes.
You keep watching because you're like, man, what mistake are you going to make next? And I thought it was interesting that the whole name of the series is Jedi: The Dark Side. Yeah. And they never talk about the dark side. Like, Qui-Gon, what on earth are you doing? Like, exactly. no mention is made of the dark side at all.
Yeah, no, that is such a good point, because, I mean, we obviously get like the undertones of the dark side with Xanatos like clearly going down a dark path, but you're so right. I didn't even think of that until you just said it. Nobody ever mentioned the dark side. There's no dark siders. I mean, why? Just why?
Yeah, it's like the dark side is just everybody talks about it on shows and movies and all the other books, and then here it's titled The Dark Side, and there is no actual phrase "the dark side" used in the whole series, I don't think.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting stuff. All right, let's move. Let's avert our eyes from this train wreck and move on to not necessarily a train wreck, but he's pretty darn close. Lord Cryon, who ends up, we find out, he's actually a double agent, someone who wants more power than he has like any right of having, and he'll do anything to get it, including like staging a military coup, I guess we could describe it, against himself.
Yeah.
So obviously he's in on this insurgent movement. Like that becomes pretty clear, I think in like the third issue or so. Did you see this double cross coming, or were you surprised at his involvement?
Quite frankly, I'm still confused at his involvement. Like, wasn't he in charge before?
Yeah.
And then he started this insurgent movement. And then a bunch of people died. Right. And then he leaves, and like, I was confused if it was supposed to be like a human race purity, like no non-humans allowed, or I just didn't really understand what his like motive was. Did you understand?
I'm glad we're talking about this because the answer is no. Like, no, I didn't really understand it.
It was very confusing.
Yeah, like I thought that like the only thing I could think of is to like stage this sort of like war type of thing and blame it on the Antarians so that they didn't have to have like diplomatic relations with them anymore. That was like the only thing I could think of. But why he had to like pin it against himself, I have no idea. And the other thing, maybe he was trying to lure the Jedi so he could see Xanatos again. I don't really know.
I have no idea.
But yeah, that was like, a very confusing part though. And I feel like if they made it maybe a little clearer, like that would clear up a lot of our confusion, because it's like what was the purpose of all of this? I mean, we had the high priestess that died. Like that was the whole reason for the Jedi actually being called there, because it was causing like a civilian uprising because they missed their spiritual leader. But I'm still not 100% sure if like Lord Cryon was responsible for that, if it was like the mercenaries who were responsible for that. I have no idea.
Yeah, no clue. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
There's like no words. If you know, listeners or
watchers, please let us
know.
Share your insight.
Yes, Discord, YouTube comments. Send a carrier pigeon. We need to know. One more question about Lord Cryon, who I think at this point, after what we just discussed, we can call him a train wreck too, because who knows what he was doing. Do you have any sympathy for him or for his cause?
Seeing that I don't really know what his cause even is, no, I don't really get it. He wasn't very clear. It's clear that he has some messed up views mentally of what needs to happen and who should be in charge. But since I don't really know what his cause is specifically, no, I have no sympathy for it. What about you?
Okay, no sympathy here either. I think it's bad to kill your people on purpose.
That's generally considered like,
I feel comfortable
immoral.
Speaking for all of you teeny on that. Yep. So no, I don't even know why I wrote that question, because frankly, if you have sympathy for him, I would be concerned, to be honest.
Based on what we read, like if he had some like weird backstory about how his rightful place on the throne was taken and his whole family was murdered, I might have some sympathy, but we got none of that. So There is no reason for me to be okay with his evil actions.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason that I would feel like an ounce of sympathy for him is if we got the story of how Xanatos was brought to the Jedi, and if for some reason he was like taken without his consent or something like that, then I could feel some sympathy for him. But
yeah, that's a good point.
We had like zero information on why he was doing what we were doing. I mean, there's probably some information like hidden in there, but I mean, I read this thing 3 times. I still don't understand.
That makes me feel better. I reread those pages several times, and then I just thought maybe it'll get clearer later. Maybe it's one of those like slow releases. I think that's how it was intended to be.
Yeah.
But then it just was shrouded for too long, and then they tried to sum it all up too quickly, and things were lost, in my opinion.
No, I think that's like a really good guess at what happened. I mean, I would hope that they didn't do that on purpose because, yeah, it was certainly confusing. But
maybe it's supposed to be a longer series, and then they just
true,
decided to
that's
keep
another
it
thing.
short.
Yeah, yeah, 2011. That was like 3 years before the canon Legend separation. So it might have been intended to be dealt with in a different way. I don't know. I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know.
So another character that I'd like to talk about is briefly is Dairoki, who is Nason's love interest and also the leader of the insurgent movement against Lord Cryon, but is also sort of like Lord Cryon's informant, apparently. So do you think that I'm very interested to hear your answer on this. Do you think that Dairoki was the real mastermind behind all of the insurgent stuff, or was he just taking orders from Cryon?
I think that he was taking orders for the most part, but he was advanced enough as a warrior to be given more free reign. I don't think that he was the real mastermind, because with him being Nason's love interest, that added an interesting twist.
Yeah,
where it kind of dumbed his character down a bit, where like he really was only doing it for Nason. Who was she trying to take control first? Like, was she trying to like get rid of her father?
Well, exactly. I mean, that was the other thing I was confused about. At the beginning, that's what I thought, because when we saw them like kind of hiding in the shadows and like plotting stuff, I was like, oh, she's like trying to take the throne or something. But then later, when we see that Dairoki and Nason are actually like, or sorry, Dairoki and Cryon are actually like working together, then I was kind of wondering, and this actually leads into my next question. And by the way, I agree with you. He was certainly not the brains of that operation. He didn't seem like he was smart enough to do it.
No one knew how she got shot. Like, who shot her?
Exactly.
No one knows.
Exactly. So that's actually a great segue into my next question. Do you think that he like really loved Nason, or was he just trying to get on Cryon's good side?
I think that he weirdly really loved her.
I agree.
Because he like Legends characters don't say weird things like, you'll never know how much she really means to me. Like they just don't say that unless there's like a love interest. Like there's no like brotherly love connection.
Yeah.
It's only amorous love. So that it was weird. And she was like dressed up like Genie or something from like that 1970s show. What is that? I Dream of Jeannie. She reminded me a lot of that character, which was very odd. It was very Legendsy. We're like,
yes, it did feel very Legendsy.
Yes, like the scarred, like I don't know, like man with the broken past is like in love with this genie type character that everyone loves, and yet somehow ends up dying. Like someone directly shot her. It's not like she jumped to like get in like the way. I don't know. It was
I know what you're saying.
Love.
It feels extremely Legendsy.
Yes.
And yeah, I actually do agree with you. It doesn't seem like it doesn't feel like he's smart enough to like make the connection like, oh, if I love his daughter and like treat her well, then I'll get on his good side. He doesn't seem smart enough to figure that out. So I think it's a safe bet to say that like somehow they really loved each other, which is very interesting. Somehow those crazy kids. So moving on, last character here. With Nason, who obviously, like we've said, was caught between two interests, that of her love, assuming that she really loved Dairoki. We determined that Dairoki probably really loved Nason. I assume, before I finish my summary on Nason, do you think that she really loved Dairoki in return?
I think so. I don't think it's ever implied that she didn't. So I'm assuming that it was requited.
Agree. Okay. So, so her interests are split between Dairoki and her father's interests and her, like, royal responsibilities, I guess you could say. But then, I mean, later on, we find out that, like, those interests are actually kind of the same because they were working together, which makes it even more confusing. She's also, like, a casualty of just, like, a bunch of people seeking power and not thinking of the consequences of seeking that power. do you think, or do you place any blame on Nason for the fate of Telos 4? Like, in other words, she was like playing both sides of the fence. Like, did she cause the confusion on the planet and ultimately bring Telos 4 to the brink of civil war? Do you blame her for that?
No, I think that she legitimately wanted what was best for her people. And I think that her father's love and like quest for more power definitely corrupted that. So I think that he had some misguided ideas of what love was supposed to be. And I think she legitimately would have done good things for her people. She says that she wishes that, unity and peace could be achieved without any more casualties. So I think you see that she has a good heart. I think when she dies, it's like kind of the redeeming, like the last good part of the insurgency has just gone. Like it's only pain and death from here on out.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
I agree with you. I think that she was like caught up between everybody's like interests, and she's sort of being tugged in like every direction, and I think also, like, to quote Padme Amidala, so love has blinded you. I think love blinded her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that like she didn't have the ability to foresee what was going to happen to Telos 4 if they started this like insurrection, I guess. So I certainly, I actually feel bad for her, even though she was kind of like involved, in terms of like the whole Dairoki stuff. So yes, she was involved, but I do feel bad for her. I mean, she did die because of all of this, and it was a pretty brutal death too.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't good. So that's it for our character section. We have a few overarching questions to round it out before we get to our Easter egg section. So this is going to be an interesting question as well. Any question regarding Xanatos and Qui-Gon, I'm like very interested to hear your answer on, because I'm very confused about what I think on their relationship. So I love hearing your answer. So do you think that Xanatos was wrong for assuming that Qui-Gon wanted Ori-Khan as his new Padawan? Like was he right in assuming that Qui-Gon just wanted to drop him off on Telos 4 so he could have a new Padawan?
I mean, obviously he wasn't correct. Like that wasn't Qui-Gon's intention. I think that this is a classic case of the Jedi being like stupidly cryptic. Like never saying what they actually think. They just kind of set situations and just watch and see what happens. And that was a mistake. That's a mistake usually when you're dealing with people. People need to be told up front what the deal is in order for them to feel secure. So I don't blame him for being jealous. I think I would have been jealous too, and I would have had the same thoughts. Would it have come out in the same way? Probably not. But when you're dealing with Force users, usually they're a bit more emotional. Well, dark side users, obviously more emotional. So I think that he was already too close to the edge, and adding his replacement into the mix was way too early and in too sensitive of a place. Like if you were going to do that, don't do it on his homeworld. So that was I would say that was a council mistake. More so than him, because he is still a Padawan. Like he's not a master.
Right.
What were your thoughts?
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, he can't make his own decisions. He kind of did try to warn Qui-Gon that like it's probably not the best idea for me to go there. Like
he did.
Like, why are we going there? So
yes,
maybe we should have listened to him. I don't know. But I think that if I was in his position, I would have been suspicious too. Like, oh, you're trying to like just drop me off at the easiest place you can think of. Yeah, I absolutely would have been suspicious, especially where Ori-Khan just lost her master and Tal doesn't want a Padawan. Like everything kind of adds
which, by the
up.
way, is pretty cold.
Like, very much so. Although,
come on, man.
Like librarians can have Padawans too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Also, she's like weirdly the sexiest librarian I've ever seen. Like,
Very
why is
true.
she illustrated
Yes.
in such a sensual way?
I know. And then
That was also very Legendsy.
we go from her to Jocasta Nu.
Yes. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand her, but
You're so right. That did feel so. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so Legendsy. So, and I guess I honestly had a hard time when I was looking her up on Wikipedia. Apparently, she is not a human, and I thought she was a human.
she came across as a human at first.
Yes.
And that's what I originally thought she was a human.
Yeah.
But then after seeing close-ups of her face, her eyes are different.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly she is.
Yeah, I think Wikipedia said she's a Noorian, Noorian, Noorian.
Huh.
I don't know if I've ever seen one before, but they're like extremely human looking with some different eyes, so that's cool. And apparently they have a love for information, which is also great. Do you think Qui-Gon was going back to the council like they suggested at the very end, or do you think he was going on a mission and doing something else? Because he was very, like you said before, he was very cryptic with Xanatos, and he was also very cryptic with the council about what he was going to do at the end.
He was. And it is very interesting that this was the end of the series because we don't get a follow-up. Maybe you have the answer, but he kind of, it seemed to me like he needed to do some soul searching, some way seeking, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm unsure whether he was going to find Xanatos and try to bring him back to the light. Maybe he just didn't want to admit that Xanatos really went over to the dark side. Maybe he didn't want to say that to the council. That's why he told him that he was dead.
Yeah.
I think that it's deliberately left very open-ended because Qui-Gon is a pretty open-ended Jedi. Like he doesn't do things normally.
Right.
So he's always a bit of a wild card to me. I don't really have a guess as to what he was going to do. I think there's a few options. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually don't have the answer to that. However, I do think that it's likely in those books that I was telling you about that Xanatos shows up in again. I think they're called the Jedi Apprentice books. I'll give everybody the exact answer when we get to our Easter egg section. I definitely felt like he wanted to do something before he got back to the council. I mean, in Master and Apprentice, and again, I know that this was written before, like much before Master and Apprentice, but in Master and Apprentice, we see that he's very focused on like prophecies and knowledge and all of that. And I wonder if he's like, oh, I encountered this like dark energy in Xanatos at the end there, and I kind of wonder if he needed to, I don't know, like meditate and like cleanse from that. I don't know if maybe that was like a stressor for him, but it definitely felt like there was something like traumatic in there from that experience that he was definitely like, there's something like pent up in there that he needed to like, I don't know, get rid of or something. So yeah, I definitely do not think he was following his orders by the council, because I mean, generally Qui-Gon doesn't seem like the type of person to follow orders anyways. So
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll be interested. I'll be interested if we see what follows directly after the ending of this. If that does happen in the Jedi Apprentice books, we'll have to ask Jared and see if that's it. Because
I'm sure Jared has the answer. He always has the answer.
Yeah, he always does. He always does.
Jared or Trevor.
Yes. So if that's the case, if it picks up, if the Jedi Apprentice books pick up directly after the ending of this miniseries and Xanatos comes back, I might have to read them. I mean, I'm pretty interested in what Qui-Gon was doing and Xanatos and his interaction later on. So, all right. One more overarching question before Easter eggs. Going back to Nason, and like we were saying earlier, we do feel like bad about her death and stuff. It was gruesome and unfortunate. Who would you place blame on for her death? Would it be Qui-Gon, Dairoki, the insurgents, or someone else? And I'm not talking about like necessarily who pulled the trigger. I don't think we'll ever know that. But who created the environment and the situation for that to happen?
I think Qui-Gon seems to be the mastermind behind the whole thing. So I would say it's probably him. Yeah. What do you think?
I would agree with that for sure. I mean, he definitely didn't want her dead. Like that was certainly not his intention. But I think that the only person you can point to is him. The only person that like started this whole insurgency thing was him. And anything that happens after that, I think, should count as his fault, personally.
Agreed.
All right, so let's dive into some Easter eggs, and then we will re-rate the book. So a few fun things here. As we suspected, Xanatos lives, like I said, and is present in, I believe, 2 of the Jedi Apprentice books. I actually have the specific titles here. The Captive Temple and The Day of Reckoning, which are both by Jude Watson. So yeah, I'll have to maybe look at those ones on Wikipedia specifically. Xanatos isn't the only Jedi that appears in the Jedi Apprentice books. Master Tal has quite the presence in the series. She appears in like multiple books, like way more than 2. Yeah.
Now, granted, she's really cool, but you don't make a sexy character and have them completely die unless they're dressed up like a genie, in which case.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you're dressed up as a genie, you're a goner. That's all I got.
Yeah, you're out.
Next up, we have Xanatos suggested that a diplomat should go to Telos 4 in their stead. He specifically mentioned Master Dooku, who was a Jedi at this time. He wasn't the Count Dooku that we know from the prequels. So interesting mention there. I think things would have gone better for Xanatos had Dooku gone instead.
It's weird though, because there are some parallels between those 2 characters.
Oh, for
like
sure,
both are noble born. They go to the dark side. So I don't know that it would have ended much differently.
Oh, you're so right. Oh my god, I didn't even think of that. You're right. Yeah, he's a count. Oh my goodness.
Talk about another interesting character.
Oh my god, I could talk like all day about Count Dooku. He's so interesting. I always get excited whenever he's mentioned.
Me too.
Yeah.
My faves.
Master Tal foreshadows Naboo as being a place that she senses will have a significant event happen there. We know this to be the Battle of Naboo from The Phantom Menace. She was just kind of like talking about force powers with Qui-Gon, and she's like, Naboo's so beautiful, something big's going to happen there. I don't know how those 2 things connect, but she got it. Next up, we have Toprawa, which is a planet mentioned because of its population of Antarian Rangers, has much significance in legends. The Death Star super laser was designed on this planet, and there was also a rebel base where spies could give information to Alliance leaders on Toprawa. So it's got a really big presence like later on in like the original trilogy era, New Republic era. So interesting stuff there. Speaking of Antarian Rangers, in Legends they played a big role in the Clone Wars by joining Jedi on missions. Because of this, they were tracked down by Darth Vader and the Inquisitorius like any other Jedi would be. Luke learned about them later, and he spent some time looking for Antarian Rangers as well. And lastly, after informing the Council that his lightsaber was destroyed in the duel between himself and Qui-Gon, the Council tells him they will have a Kyber crystal, spelled Kaiburr crystal, for him, for his new lightsaber. This is the old way of spelling what we now know as the Kyber crystal, but they have essentially the same function in canon and legends. So that was just kind of a nerdy spelling thing that I wanted to point out.
Oh, I definitely noticed that. I was that's not right.
I was like furiously typing in my computer, what is a Kyber crystal? I was like, what is this?
Right? Because it's like they have the synthetic Kyber crystals. Is that what the Sith use? Is that why their lightsabers are red?
I think it's they bleed it. So they like put their force energy into it, because the Kyber crystal has like a living thing.
Yes.
To my understanding, and then they like put their like dark energy and power into it and make it bleed. And then the reason, this is also a huge tangent and has nothing to do with this, but Ahsoka's lightsabers are white because she reversed the bleeding and like purified it or something like that. So I
do remember that happens at the end of the Ahsoka book.
Yes,
and it was wonderful.
Yes. Lightsaber lore is so much fun. I could talk about it all day. It's something I'm like very nerdy about.
Well, good, because I don't know very much about it, and I keep waiting to find books that will tell me more. And it's just like every book is like just a tiny little piece.
Yeah. Do you have I think it's called the lightsaber book. It's a reference book that came out recently.
I
Oh my
don't. I
gosh.
saw it. I actually like put it on as we were making Utini.gifts. I put it on one of
Oh, nice.
the gift guides because I thought it's beautiful. It's such
so
a gorgeous
pretty.
book.
It's got some pretty good information on lightsabers in there, actually.
Good to know.
So I'd highly recommend if you're like me and you love lightsaber lore, definitely check that one out.
Sounds good. I'll have to do that.
Awesome. All right. Before we get out of here, let's re-rate the book. I know personally, like a lot of times I go up on these ratings. So I wrote down what our scores were at the start of this conversation, and let me find it. And okay, you started out with a 7.6. What would you rate this book now?
I've got to stay steady with my 7.6. I thought that to understand that you reread it multiple times and had the same confusion about the plot, for that reason, I think I'm going to stay where I'm at. Okay, what's your new rating?
Solid. So I started with a 6.8. Is it bad that I want to go down?
I thought about going down, but I was like, no.
It's just, I mean,
they tried.
They did try, and I feel so horrible doing that. I really do. So I'm just gonna bring it down by 0.1. I'm gonna, 6.7.
Well, that's very kind. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Yes. Merry Christmas to the creative team here. I really hope you're not watching this.
I know it would have been really great if it was like twice as long, and you could have
exactly.
Embellished some of the political stuff.
And I'm not saying like this was bad like at all. I'm just saying like it was definitely confusing, but I did like the characters. I mean, if they're very close to making me read Jedi Apprentice books, which I never thought I would ever do. So that has to count for something, right?
Yes.
It does. It's like
it does raise a lot of questions. It definitely whets my appetite for more.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll give it some brownie points for that. I know those don't count for real points, but all right. That'll do it for this episode. Emily, thank you so much for coming on and for making this your second ever comic. It was super fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to be able to discuss with only one other person. I don't think either of us have ever done that.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was, the conversation really moved. I got to talk a lot more than I do most of the time. Legends look back, just because most of the time I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to have me on the show.
Absolutely. Well, you're welcome back anytime. This was a blast. All right. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the show right here on YouTube, where you can watch us live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We also encourage you to subscribe to our audio version on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Be sure to visit utini.com for reviews, articles, and news for every single story in the Star Wars galaxy. We encourage you to join our Utini Discord community by going to utini.com/discord, and you can help support the show by heading to patreon.com/utini and start receiving exclusive perks starting at just $5 a month. A special thank you to JG Kars, OK Endar, Cheryl Bell, Patrick Ortiz, Carl Sander, and Earl Q on our Jedi High Council, and Matt Billington, Tyler Latour, Kyle Hickman, Elizabeth Cloutier, Jason Mitchell, Freddie C., and Sally and Chris Eilerson on our Alliance High Command for their amazing support. You can tweet at the show at Cosmic Force Show or at the host individually. I'm at IrmaJedi26, and Emily is at Darth Daybeck. Thanks again to Emily for hosting with me, and a special thank you to our listeners for joining us. See everybody next week. Happy holidays, and may the Force be with you.